So now, let me read this. The significant reduction in battle-related deaths in the 21st century compared to similar periods in 20th century is often cited as a sign of progress in international relations, diplomacy, and evolving norms around conflict and warfare. Several factors contribute to this trend, such as the development of international law, the rise of peacekeeping efforts, the establishment of global institutions like the United Nations, and the increasing global awareness of the humanitarian consequences of war. However, when assessing recent international conflicts that have claimed innocent lives, we must question whether humanity is truly being upheld, especially in the light of continuing violence, injustice, and suffering. Now, Kriti, you read from the 21st century.
The 21st century, a reduction in battle related deaths. Over the past 2 decades, the number of battle related deaths has indeed declined significantly, especially when compared to the brutal wars of 20th century. Key factors in this reduction includes international
Uh,
international diplomacy and peace efforts. The post World War II world saw the creation of institutions like the UN, designed to facilitate dialogue, mediate conflicts, and enforce peace. International diplomacy, treaties, and conflict resolution mechanism have played a role in preventing large-scale wars between power majors. Humanitarian laws and conventions. The development of international laws such as Geneva Conventions, which regulate the conduct of war and aim to protect civilians, has contributed to efforts to reduce the brutality of conflicts. Globalization and interdependence. The economic globalization and the interdependence of nations in trade and communication have made war between major powers less likely. The high economic cost of war in a globally connected world have become a deterrent for many states. Media and public opinion. The rise of global media, especially with the advent of social media, has made the people more aware of the human cost of war. Public outcry against military actions that result in high civilian casualties can pressure governments to avoid full scale wars. However, this reduction in battle related deaths does not mean the absence of violence or conflict in the world, especially when we look at outgoing wars and the toll they take on innocent lives.
Raghavi, Raghavi,
Yes, sir. Recent international conflicts and innocent lives lost. Despite the decrease in conventional wars, many recent international conflicts have resulted in significant civilian casualties. These conflicts highlight that the reduction in battle related deaths does not always translate into a reduction in human suffering. The Syrian Civil War, 2011 to present, casualties estimates suggest that over 5 lakh people have died in the Syrian Civil War, with millions more displaced. While the war started as an internal conflict, it quickly became an internationalized crisis with multiple foreign powers involved. Humanitarian impact. The war has led to widespread suffering among civilians with the use of chemical weapons, barrel bombs, sieges, and attacks on the civilian infrastructure. The conflict has also exacerbated the refugee crisis, leading to millions of Syrians fleeing their homes and seeking refuge in neighboring countries and Europe. Humanity upheld. The Syrian conflict underscores the limitations of international norms and humanitarian law. The international community has often failed to prevent atrocities. Despite the UN's effort to mediate and the calls for intervention, the lack of accountability for war crimes committed by all parties, including the Syrian government, ISIS, and foreign powers, suggest a gap between global efforts to reduce violence and the reality on the ground. Yemen conflict, 2014 to present. Casualties. The war in Yemen has resulted in over 250,000 deaths, with most of them being civilian casualties caused by airstrikes, blockades, and famine. The conflict also involves multiple foreign powers, including Saudi Arabia Saudi Arabia and Iran
Iran.
supporting
Different faction.
supporting different factions. Humanitarian impact. The war has precipitated one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. Yemen suffers from widespread hunger, disease, and a collapse of basic infrastructure. The blockade imposed by Saudi Arabia and the UAE has restricted access to food and medicine, exacerbating the suffering of the civilian population. Humanity upheld. The international community's response to Yemen has been largely ineffective, with little pressure placed on the parties to end the violence or address the humanitarian crisis. Despite the UN's humanitarian efforts, the ongoing conflicts shows the limits of global power in ensuring human dignity and protection in the face of entrenched geopolitical interests. The war in Ukraine 2022 to present casualties. While the war is ongoing, thousands of civilians have already lost their lives as a result of Russian invasion of Ukraine, and millions more have been displaced. Human Humanitarian impact. The conflict has resulted in widespread destruction, including attacks on civilian infrastructure, the displacement of millions of people, and the use of prohibited weapons in some instances. The conflict has sparked a global energy crisis and disrupted food supplies, particularly affecting the most vulnerable. Humanity upheld. mm,
No, 1 minute. Most
while
vulnerable.
there
Yeah. Humanity. While there has been.
while while there has been a robust international response through transactions against Russia and the support for Ukraine, the loss of innocent lives, especially civilians, and the widespread destruction in Ukraine present a grim picture of the failure to uphold humanity. The use of violence and disregard for civilian lives in some parts of the conflict underscore the persistence of vast human cost. Even in a opposite, can you please scroll?
Yeah, 1 minute. Yeah.
Supposedly more humanitarian era. Rohingya crisis. Rohingya crisis 2017 to present. Casualties. Thousands of Rohingya Muslims have been killed and over 7 lakh fled Myanmar to neighboring Bangladesh to escape violence. Humanitarian impact. The Rohingya have faced ethnic cleansing, forced displacement, and a lack of basic human rights. The international community has largely failed to hold Myanmar's military accountable, and there has been limited assistance for those in refuge camps. Humanity upheld. The systemic violence against the Rohingya suggests that international human rights protections are still frequently ignored in cases of ethnic and religious violence. The response of global institutions such as the UN has been seen as insufficient in stopping the atrocities or addressing the root causes of the conflict. Should I
Now,
read this?
Kriti, please read.
Reassessing humanity in the face of modern conflicts. While the reduction in large-scale state-to-state wars in the 21st century is a positive trend, recent international conflicts highlight the failure to fully uphold the principle of humanity in modern warfare. Several reasons contribute to this disparity. Geopolitical interest. In many cases, geopolitical consideration take precedence over the protection of civilians. Major powers and regional actors often engage in proxy wars or support authoritarian regimes, complicating efforts for peace and humanitarian relief. Failure of international institutions. While institutions like the UN exist to promote peace and security, they are often constrained by veto power, lack of enforcement mechanism, and the political interest of powerful states. This, limit their this limits their ability to effectively intervene in conflicts. Asymmetry in modern warfare. Modern conflicts often involve asymmetric warfare, where state actors, insurgent groups, or militias target civilians, use irregular tactics, and exploit the vulnerabilities of non combatants. This results in higher civilian casualties and displacement, even if the overall number of battle related deaths appears low. Conclusion. Humanity not yet fully upheld. While the 21st century has seen reductions in certain form of conflicts, it is clear that humanity is still not fully upheld in many contemporary wars. The outgoing sufferings of innocent civilians in conflicts such as Syria, Yemen, Ukraine, and Myanmar indicates that international efforts to reduce battle-related deaths have not always been successful in preventing the worst humanitarian impacts. The international community must continue to strengthen diplomatic efforts, hold violators of human rights accountable, and prioritize the protection of civilians in all conflicts. Only then we can say that humanity is the truest sense is being upheld in the modern world.
Excellent. So this has really come out to be a good answer for our many interview questions. I mean, with that in mind only, I wanted you to read this. But on a perusal of this, I am tempted to decide that during the GD, I think we have not used any example of things that is happening now. I would like Kriti and Raghavi to comment on this. Do you think you used information relating to the wars that are taking place and some details about it? Kriti.
No, sir, we just talked about Ukraine, Russia, and Palestine. We didn't discuss about it.
Yeah. Then Raghavi. See, the nowadays Federal Bank wants people to relate it to what is happening now and in the past. So please try to use some words like United Nations, Geneva Convention, like that. And so I, honestly speaking, I don't remember any of these things. That much I'm not able to remember. But I am convinced that if you use these points, 2 or 3 points in your discussions, it will get you more marks. Could you understand this now? Kriti and
Yes, sir.
yeah, I wanted you to read this specially because this is a very useful material for any of the interviews like Exim Bank, then say our Federal Bank, not that much they will ask, like insurance companies and all that. That is why I wanted this to be recorded. Thanks for reading. I'll